The air was thick with anticipation. The late-night talk show, famous for its casual vibes and celebrity guest appearances, was about to experience a shift no one saw coming. Tonight, Richard Clayton, the billionaire mogul who had built an empire from nothing, was about to face something far more dangerous than any boardroom battle. Across from him, the sharp-tongued host, known for pushing even the calmest of guests to their limits, had a plan. It was supposed to be another light-hearted conversation. But something was different. Something felt off. In the spotlight, Clayton seemed uncharacteristically tense, the kind of unease only the most dangerous questions could provoke. The host, with his signature grin, could smell the tension in the air, and with one simple question, he was about to push the billionaire past his breaking point. The audience sat on edge, oblivious to the storm about to unfold. Was Clayton finally about to crack under the pressure? Or would his legendary calmness be enough to withstand the heat of the moment? This was the night the world would watch, as two powerful forces collided in a moment that would change everything. The stage was set. The lights dimmed as Richard Clayton took his seat across from the host, Greg Lawson. Clayton, the billionaire who had made headlines for his transformative innovations, appeared poised as ever, his steely gaze cutting through the crowd. But those who knew him well could see it, the faintest tension in his jaw, the slightest clench of his fist. Tonight was not going to be business as usual. Greg Lawson was a man known for his wit, his ability to make even the most guarded celebrities crack. For years, he'd been a master of manipulation, using his charm and sharp tongue to coax hidden truths from his guests. But tonight, he wasn't interested in surface-level pleasantries. He wanted more. The audience could feel it, the shift in the atmosphere. There was a spark of challenge in his eyes. "Let's get right to it, Richard," Lawson said, leaning forward with that characteristic grin. "You've built this empire, right? What people don't talk about much is what it really cost you. Your employees, your family. How many people had to be sacrificed for you to sit here in that chair? What price did you pay for success?" The question hung in the air, charged with accusation. Clayton's hand rested on the arm of his chair, the muscles in his forearm visibly tightening. This was no ordinary question, it was a challenge. Clayton smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Success is not a path without sacrifices," he replied calmly, his voice measured. "But those sacrifices were not made lightly. I never forced anyone to do something they weren't willing to do. I've always believed in creating opportunities, not exploiting people." His response was textbook Clayton, smooth, confident, and unflappable. The audience murmured, unsure whether to believe him or feel the weight of his words. But Lawson wasn't done. He sensed the tension, and he knew he had struck a nerve. This was his moment. With a calculated tilt of his head, he pressed on. "But Richard, the world doesn't see it like that. They see a man who controls everything, a man whose every move affects thousands of lives. And they wonder, does he even care? Or is it just about the money? Your fortune, it's immeasurable. But what is it worth if you've lost everything else in the process? What would you say to the people who accuse you of being heartless, of putting profit over people?" The words felt like daggers, each one designed to pierce the billionaire's carefully curated image. For a split second, Clayton's composure wavered. His fingers tightened, his knuckles paling. The crowd held its breath, sensing the conflict brewing just below the surface. Clayton had weathered storms in the past, but this felt different. He had been asked similar questions before, but not like this. Not with such rawness. Not with such a biting edge. Greg Lawson's voice dropped, almost a whisper, but the words hit like a thunderclap. "Are you even human anymore, Richard? Or just a machine driven by money, ambition, and power?" The question was an attack, one designed to strip Clayton of everything he had worked for. The audience was on the edge of their seats, unsure how he would react. The billionaire's eyes narrowed, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned forward, breaking the tension with an almost eerie calmness. "I don't expect you to understand," Clayton said, his voice low but steady. "I built this from nothing. I didn't come from wealth or privilege. I came from the streets, and I've worked harder than anyone you'll ever meet. People have tried to tear me down my whole life. They told me I couldn't do it, that I wasn't good enough. But I proved them wrong. Not because of money, but because of conviction. Because I believed in something greater than myself." The words weren't just a defense, they were a declaration. A statement that he wouldn't be reduced to mere numbers and headlines. Lawson wasn't finished. He saw an opening, a crack in the billionaire's armor. "So you're telling me that it's okay to trample over people, to break them down, just because you believe in yourself?" Lawson's voice was growing more heated. The audience could feel the tension escalate. Clayton's expression hardened. His voice grew colder, yet there was an undeniable weight to it. I don't trample over people. I create opportunities. I give people the chance to rise, to be more than they ever imagined. But not everyone wants to rise. Some prefer to stay in the comfort of mediocrity. I can't change that. He paused, his gaze unwavering. I have sacrificed a lot, yes. But so has everyone who dares to dream big. If you want success, it's not just handed to you. You fight for it. You don't sit back and wait for it to come. His words hung in the air, like a challenge to the host and to the audience. They were raw, real, and unrelenting. For a moment, it seemed like the conversation had reached its peak. But then came the unexpected. Lawson's tone softened, his eyes narrowing slightly as he leaned back in his chair, studying Clayton carefully. And when all this is over, Richard, when you're lying in your bed at the end of the day, do you ever ask yourself, was it worth it? Was the price worth paying? The question was different now, more personal, more vulnerable. It cut deeper than the previous ones, and it left Clayton silent for a long moment. The billionaire didn't answer immediately. He simply stared at Lawson, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched on, and for a brief instant, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. And then, Clayton spoke. His voice was softer now, but it carried the weight of a man who had seen it all and survived. I don't live for the end of the day. I live for the journey. I live for the moments when I see people who've worked with me change their lives, when I see them rise and do something they never thought they could. If I die tomorrow, I will know I gave everything I had. That's enough for me. His words were not a defense, but a confession. A quiet truth that no one had expected. The studio fell silent. Even Greg Lawson, who had built his career on rattling people's cages, found himself at a loss for words. The tension that had been building throughout the interview now melted away, replaced by a deep, almost reverent silence. Richard Clayton had, in that moment, become more than just a billionaire mogul. He had become a man who had found peace amidst the chaos. The host stared at him, seemingly stunned. And for the first time that evening, the audience realized that they were witnessing something truly extraordinary. The room was electric with tension. The audience had been on edge throughout the interview, but now, with Richard Clayton's calm confession, the air felt heavier than ever. Greg Lawson stared at him, his usual quick wit replaced by an unexpected silence. Clayton's words had cut deeper than any of his provocations, leaving the host in a rare moment of uncertainty. Greg Lawson shifted in his seat, eyes narrowing. His reputation was on the line. He had pushed Clayton to the edge, trying to provoke a reaction, and yet the billionaire had weathered every storm with a quiet strength that left Lawson fumbling for his next move. And he needed something, anything, to salvage the confrontation. He couldn't let Clayton walk away as the unquestionable victor. You don't think about the cost, do you, Richard? Lawson finally spoke, his voice now tinged with a hint of desperation. The lives you've ruined, the people you've stepped on to get where you are. How do you live with yourself? The question hit like a hammer, hard and unforgiving. Clayton didn't flinch. His gaze never wavered. He knew this moment was coming. He had expected this. The world would never understand the choices he had made, nor should they. He had always been a man of conviction, of unwavering belief in his purpose. But now, as Lawson pushed, he saw the opportunity for one final reckoning. I'm not going to sit here and justify every move I've made, Clayton said, his voice low but unwavering. I've made mistakes, just like anyone else. But I've never lied to myself about who I am or what I've done. I've taken risks. I've made decisions that weren't popular. But I stand by them. Because every choice, every mistake, led me to this moment. He leaned forward, his eyes locking with Lawson's. And you know what? I've made a difference, too. People who were once struggling, people who had nothing, now have a chance because I didn't back down. I created something bigger than myself. I gave people something to fight for. That's not heartless. That's not selfish. That's purpose. The room fell into a heavy silence as the weight of Clayton's words hung in the air. For the first time that evening, Lawson's smug grin faltered. There was no response. No retort. Clayton's words had struck a chord, a note that Lawson had never anticipated. It wasn't just the billionaire's calm demeanor or his wealth that stunned the host, it was the purity of his conviction. Richard Clayton wasn't the villain Lawson had painted him to be. He wasn't heartless. He was a man who believed in something bigger than himself. The silence between them stretched. Lawson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, visibly rattled. This was not the outcome he had anticipated. He had wanted to break Clayton, to expose him for the cold, calculating businessman he had been portrayed as. But instead, he found himself facing someone whose strength lay not in power, but in resilience. And that was something he couldn't break. Clayton's voice, calm and steady, broke through the silence. "You want me to apologize for my success, for my choices? I won't. I'll never apologize for building something from nothing. I won't apologize for working every single day to make this world a better place, one decision, one sacrifice at a time." He paused, his eyes softening, as if the weight of the conversation had shifted. "But I will tell you this, I never stopped caring. I care about the people who are with me on this journey. And if that makes me heartless, then so be it. But if you're going to make a man out to be a villain, you better be sure you know what you're talking about." The finality in his words was undeniable. The audience had been expecting a breakdown, a confrontation. But what they got instead was an unshakable resolve. And in that moment, something shifted. Greg Lawson, the man who had spent years provoking his guests for entertainment, found himself in awe of Clayton. The billionaire had not crumbled. He had not backed down. He had not even raised his voice. He had simply spoken the truth. As the cameras zoomed out, Lawson's face showed no sign of the confident, teasing host he had been at the start of the night. Instead, there was a sense of admiration. And for the first time in years, he found himself speechless. Richard Clayton had done the unthinkable. He had turned the tables. He had shown the world what true strength looked like. As the segment came to a close, the audience erupted into applause, some out of relief, others in disbelief. The host, stunned into silence, didn't know how to respond. Richard Clayton, the man who had been pushed to his breaking point, had emerged not only unscathed but victorious. In the end, it wasn't the billionaire's wealth or influence that won the night. It was his unwavering belief in his purpose. It was his resilience, his refusal to be reduced to a villain. And that, more than anything, had changed everything. As the applause echoed through the studio, the camera zoomed in on Richard Clayton. The once relentless billionaire, who had been pushed to the very edge of his patience, now sat at the center of a moment that would be remembered for years to come. The man who had faced relentless questioning, provocation, and accusations had stood tall, undaunted, unshaken, and resolute. In the heat of the moment, when everyone expected him to break, to fall into the trap of bitterness and defensiveness, he had instead found his inner strength. His unwavering belief in his mission, his purpose, had emerged victorious. What the world saw that night was not just the triumph of a businessman over a talk show host. No, what was truly remarkable was the power of resilience, the strength of conviction, and the profound impact of staying true to one's purpose despite the challenges that life throws in the way. Richard Clayton's victory was not measured in dollars or followers. It was measured in the unshakable belief that doing the right thing, standing up for what you believe in, and never compromising your values, no matter the cost, is what truly matters in this world. In a world that constantly pushes us to compromise, to settle, to give in to pressure and doubt, Clayton's actions serve as a reminder. A reminder that strength is not just in the power to dominate, but in the courage to stay grounded in who you are, in the face of adversity. A reminder that your purpose is bigger than any obstacle or provocation, and when you are true to that purpose, you cannot be broken. As the cameras faded out and the night came to a close, Clayton's words lingered in the air. They were not just words of defense, but of wisdom. Wisdom that transcended the superficiality of wealth, fame, or status. In that moment, he reminded everyone watching that success is not about what you have, but about who you are, what you stand for, and the legacy you leave behind. So, the next time you face a challenge, when you feel like the world is pushing against you, remember Richard Clayton's words. The strength to overcome isn't found in power or money. It's found in your unwavering belief in your own purpose, in your own integrity. Let that be the foundation of everything you do, and like Clayton, you'll find the courage to rise above the noise, to rise above the doubt, and to stand tall in the face of anything that comes your way.